This podcast is brought to you by Ventilect, your tech recruitment partner for a changing world.
For me, one of the most important things is candidate experience. I just want to tell people to keep your head up, use your networking skills, because that's what we do in talent acquisition, right? We're master networkers. And building and setting up interview trainings to put your entire organization through, I think, are so important.
Greg Ivany has gone from individual contributor to director of talent acquisition. He's hired hundreds and hundreds of people, taken companies from startup all the way through their IPO, and now manages a global TA team. In this episode, he shares his story, how he's done it, why he's done it, and the massive amount of lessons he's learned along the way. This episode will be brilliant for someone in TA, but maybe someone who's looking to make that next step to that management level, as he really discusses the struggles he's had in balancing that role and how he can make an impact more as a manager. Greg is a wonderful conversationalist. I learned so much from him. I enjoyed speaking with him, and I hope you enjoy listening to him as well. So, without further ado, I'm Alex Bloisey, and this is the Building Our World podcast. Greg Ivany, welcome to the show. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on finally. We've got tons of stuff I want to cover today in this episode. My list of questions beside me and themes is exhaustive. But as always, I want to start with yourself. What I like to do, especially with like talent acquisition guests, recruitment guests, call it what you will, if we go back to the beginning and how you actually got into this profession, which, let's face it, people don't grow up, longing to be a recruiter, usually.
It's so true.
So with yourself, how did it all happen?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me, Alex. I really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this conversation. That's a great question, honestly, and one of my favorite things to talk to talent acquisition folks about. Because like you said, nobody really grew up like wanting to be a corporate recruiter, and it really seems. I don't think I've ever met anyone that got into this industry intentionally. They've always all sort of fell into it somehow, some way. And I'm always so curious as to how people sort of fell into it. And it was the same for me, honestly. So basically, the short version is, after spending about 15 years in the hospitality industry, I needed a change. I needed to do something different. I was just looking for something different, and so I went to school for broadcasting and audio engineering, and kind of was working in the audio engineering field for a period of time. Wasn't really sort of realizing that that's what I wanted to do forever and that sort of thing. And so I had always kept jobs since I was a teenager. I had always kept jobs in the hospitality industry of varying different levels and types and things of that nature. And a good friend of mine, I had also worked in various other fields, over the years, one of them being in real estate here in New York City, mostly in Brooklyn. And one of my best friends to this day, I met through doing real estate. And he had, prior to doing real estate, had done some agency recruiting and things like that, and then eventually got back into in-house corporate recruiting after getting out of real estate. And he and I were chatting, and, basically, and I've told him this many times, over the years. I really, shout out to Brandon Fields. I owe my career to him in a lot of ways, because he was the one who kind of convinced me, hey, I think you'd be really good at this, and it'll get you out of the grind of nights and weekends and everything else, and missing family parties and missing holidays because you're working all the time in the hospitality industry and things of that nature. And through Brandon is kind of how I got my foot in the door, in terms of starting out doing corporate recruiting, and it's really just kind of grown from there, over a decade now.
So
Of
is it
doing
2012 you made the switch?
yes. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, hospitality in itself. I mean, I did a little bit of it when I was younger. Man, it's a tough gig. It's a tough.
It is, and I loved every second of it, to be completely honest. And I've always thought about, hey, you know what? It is something I could go back to if I wanted to as well. I mean, it's an industry that I absolutely have a deep passion for and a lot of respect for. And I'll be honest, I think that every person should at some point work in that industry to really, the life skills that I gained, not only just waiting tables, bartending, working in kitchens, I've done it all, managing teams, and all that sort of thing. I got all that kind of experience. You learn how to multitask. You learn, how to deal with any and every type of personality that you could possibly come across. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible life skills, I think, that you can gain out of working in that field. And I would never change any of that if I were to go back,
Yeah, the crossover between hospitality and recruitment. I've always thought you can learn so much from other industries, and I've always think if I could get a hospitality consultant or something into a recruitment business, whether it's agency or an internal talent team, and they could maybe tell you the touch points of candidate experience, the little things, and how to make people feel, the optics of stuff. There must be so much crossover and so much that we can learn from that.
Oh, 100%. And I tell people, because I still have a lot of friends that are in the industry to this day, and they ask, like, how do I make a switch at this age? At this point in my life, where do I make a switch? How do I make a switch? HR and or recruiting is a great way to do it if that's what they want to do. It's a fantastic career. It can get them out of the industry, and the skills are so applicable.
Yeah. A people business. So you started as a corporate recruiter in 2020.
Yeah.
Right?
So unlike a lot of people, that often will go agency first and then into an internal corporate role, I skipped the agency aspect, and no disrespect to any agency recruiters out there, but I'm actually really glad that that's how my career path has went. I would always much prefer to be internal, and I will always remain internal. I've been contacted over the years by agencies and saying, hey, why don't you come in and lead this team for us, and blah blah blah, and I just have zero interest in it.
Okay, why is that? Just have interest.
What's that?
Why is that? Where do you think the sort of key differences are there?
I think a lot of it has to do with as much as I am a hustler and absolutely love to work hard and all of that, that's not what I'm looking to do. I'm not trying to cold call companies and try and gain business and blah, blah, blah. There's a reason I'm not in sales anymore. I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just not something that I really am interested in at this point. And I much prefer as well the relationship building that I get to have on an internal team with the executive leadership and with all the different HODs and and hiring managers and everything like that, and really being able to see someone that I hired, 5 or 6 years ago that's, climbed up through the ranks and might be, a director or a VP now and leading teams and things like that, and being able to watch their career blossom after bringing them in. There's something I really appreciate about that, I think, and just what I would prefer doing with my career in terms of being internal. So I never did the agency thing, went directly internal. Really kind of didn't have any idea what I was doing. I'm like, okay, so what do I have to do here? And with again, shout out to Brandon with his guidance and things like that. He was like, you're basically just selling jobs to folks and selling a company to someone, and you're selling candidates to the hiring manager. And I was like, oh, okay, I got this, I started out working in travel technology, actually, and spent nearly 4 years working in the travel industry and travel tech industry, working on all different types of corporate positions. That's one of the things I've always kind of liked about my career as well. I've never, you get into larger organizations and sometimes it's very siloed in terms of what the recruiting teams are working on. And, they have a dedicated team just for this function and a dedicated recruiting team just for this function. And that's one of the things I've always liked about the smaller startup world and things like that. I've really been able to work across a lot of different verticals, all different corporate verticals. But I do have a knack for tech and I do love tech. And so I sort of have always leaned that way and in terms of being in the tech world. So in working for this company, like I said, I was hiring anything from travel agents to, social media marketers and sales folks and other HR professionals, and across the board. But pardon me. Tech, of course, being a huge focus of what that company does, and being the bulk of where they were hiring, that's kind of was where my main focus was. So software engineers and product managers and designers and, business analysts, et cetera, data analysts, and at all different levels. And so that was kind of my niche and my focus with that company for quite a while. As I said, I was there for nearly 4 years. And I happened to get approached by another company. I wasn't super actively looking at the time, but someone happened to reach out to me and it was just seemed very interesting. And that was when I moved over to Hearst Digital Media Group. It was really intriguing to me at that point because I had always kind of worked in the smaller startup environment. Yep. And Hearst was a 130-year-old, 20,000 global person company, legacy media company. And I was like, I just kind of want to see what the other side of the coin looks like in a large organization like that. So I got brought on as a tech recruiter to focus on their digital magazine division. Which was a lot of fun. I mean, incredible, very well-known brands that we were working on and really interesting sort of projects and interesting, challenges that the engineering teams had to work within in this organization. So it was very fascinating. It was somewhat short-lived because I don't know folks out there if they're at all familiar with the publishing industry. It shifts a lot all the time. And they're always going, and they struggle as well a lot because of, technology advancements, and they're based around, sort of legacy print media. And, so monetization is always difficult and all that type of stuff. So there's a lot of internal shifts all the time. And I happen to get, caught in a last one in, first one out sort of reorg situation. I had spoken to thousands of people over the years that's the reason that they were looking for a new position. Just so happened that I got caught up in it as well. So, no bad blood with Hearst. I totally understand reorgs happen and things like that. And honestly, one of the things that I realized while I was there is that it wasn't going to be a long-term home for me anyways. I prefer the startup world. That was something I learned very quickly. I prefer the fast pace environment. I prefer sort of building something from scratch, which, that's not Hearst at all. They've been around forever, and again, no disrespect to them. Fantastic company to work for. But it wasn't going to be my long-term home no matter what. They just happened to speed up that decision a little bit for me. And so that's what ended up ultimately leading to fuboTV.
Awesome. I wanted to just pull you up on that as well. You said you went through a reorg and it got time cut short. A lot of people, this month and in recent months have gone through that as well, especially in talent acquisition. LinkedIn feeds are full, headlines, and it can make for pretty grim reading. And I'm still
last year too. I had to trim down my team. The company cut by probably 10%, and we shut down one of our business units. So definitely very familiar.
Yeah. So I mean, someone who's been through it and come through the other side, and obviously you've been on the other side of the fence as well. I don't know if you could give any advice to maybe people right now going through that, because it can be quite overwhelming for some people.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And, I hate to sound a little bit cliche, but don't let it get you down. And one of the things I realized, everything happens for a reason. That had that not happened with Hearst, I don't know if I would have found fuboTV. And finding fuboTV, to be completely honest, has been my absolute favorite part of my career. The teams that I have worked with have been the best folks that I've ever worked with in my life. They're absolutely amazing. The excitement around this company and, loving what I'm doing, loving who I'm working with. Had I not been laid off from Hearst, I wouldn't have been forced to go find something else. And so I may not have found Fubo, and I don't know where I would have eventually left Hearst, absolutely, but I don't know where I would have landed, and I don't know what I would have done, and that sort of thing. I definitely just want to tell people to keep your head up. Use your networking skills, because that's what we do in talent acquisition, right? We're master networkers. So definitely use your network as much as humanly possible. No matter what, the right thing will come along. I feel bad for a lot of talent acquisition folks, because we are often some of the first ones that are cut when we shouldn't be, because for multiple different reasons. Not only can we help out in a lot of different areas besides just hiring, there are so many other types of projects that maybe have been put on the back burner that the talent acquisition team could execute flawlessly. But what are you going to do when the spigots turn back on too? Because here's one thing we've all realized and learned. All of this is cyclical, so everybody's going to be freaking out for a little while and going through lots of cuts and slashing because they want to fix their bottom line to be more profitable, right? And then all of a sudden they're going to realize that they need more resources in order to keep that profitability happening. So they have to hire again, but now they don't have a talent acquisition team to do it. So they have to go out and hire another talent acquisition team all over again. It happens all the time. We've both been doing this a long time. I'm sure you've seen it yourself plenty of times as well. It'll go down.
COVID was a big example.
Right. And it's just going to come, every time it comes down, it's just going to come back up. So people just need to, especially they need to not get discouraged. It's unfortunate that the TA team often goes first, like I said, because there's so much more that we can do and work on, and projects that could keep us busy while things are on a hiring freeze and things like that. But definitely, like I said, everything happens for a reason. The next thing that you may come across might be your personal favorite aspect of your career. I mean, I'm a perfect example of that right here with what I'm doing right now,
Exactly. Words of encouragement. And yeah, you're so right. I mean, resilience, negotiation, strategy, even like employer branding, like
Oh,
so many
absolutely.
things that could be absolutely invaluable to other areas of the business.
I've worked on this a few times over the years in my career as well. And it's so important for organizations because everywhere you go, you realize people are not good at interviewing. And building and setting up interview trainings to put your entire organization through, I think, are so important. And I've done it numerous times, throughout my career of either building one and executing it, or, at Hearst, joining one and executing it, and then getting to build another one here at Fubo and things like that. There's a very time consuming project that the talent acquisition team could take under, and while hiring is slowed down, and building and putting the entire organization through interview training so that they can really, because one of the most important things, obviously you're aware of this, but for me, one of the most important things is candidate experience,
Yeah.
And whether somebody gets the job or not is neither here nor there, at the end of the day. But you want them to go out there and say, oh, you applied to a job at Fubo. I interviewed with them last year. I didn't get the job, but it was the best experience I've ever had interviewing for a company. That's what you want people out on the street to be saying. And so the candidate experience is so important. And so that interview training all, funnels into that. The better people are in interviewing, the better the candidate experience is going to be, the better the employer branding is going to be out there just naturally from people talking about the company after going through the process,
Yeah. That's so true. Getting and I see it so much with our clients. If we have a client where a hiring manager just isn't selling it, or maybe they're caught up in a system where they're having so many interviews that they're kind of rushed off their feet that they can't fully engage with the candidate. The candidate, it rubs off on them, that they can see it, and it
Absolutely.
makes the
How
offer
many times
acceptance rate.
how many times have you had candidates say, Alex, that was an awful experience. I don't want to
Yeah.
interview further with them. And, and you
Yeah.
might be calling them to tell them, hey, they loved you. They want you to go further in the process. And then you have to sell them all over again because they're about to walk away from it.
It happens. It happens a lot.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Especially. I mean, I don't know other industries, but in tech, when engineering managers can get overloaded with everything, and as well as interviews, and it's a huge factor in
And here's one of
whether
the
an offer
toughest
gets
things with
accepted.
tech, too, is that they don't have to take your job. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, as much as like we'd like to think that we have the upper hand as the company, we don't. Let's be honest, especially in the tech industry, because everybody needs software engineers and product managers and product designers and all that kind of stuff. They don't have to take our job. They can go get one wherever they want. Obviously we're in a down, we're in a little bit of a decline at the moment, right? Where jobs are getting slashed all over the place, et cetera, et cetera. I totally understand that. But as a whole in the tech industry, especially when it comes to engineering, they don't have to take our job. We really they have to want to take our job. We have to do a good job of telling them why this is the right opportunity for them. And if they go through a bad experience with a hiring manager, they're going to be like, well, I'm out of here because I'm interviewing with 4 other companies that have been better,
Yeah. So true, so true. And even now, we've seen it even in the January. I know there's lesser competition, but if you're a good senior engineer, you've got multiple stuff on the go, and it's
No question.
it's hugely important. Cool. So when you got into Fubo, were you do you join as sort of an individual contributor in the talent team to start off with?
Yes, I did. So Fubo at the time was very much a startup. They had only been in existence for about 2 years when I joined, maybe a little bit longer. I think the product had been live 2 years. The company itself had been around a little bit longer, but not quite 3 years, if I remember correctly. So I was employee number 42. And my boss at the time he was brought on as the first recruiter, ever in the company. He was the head of recruitment and HR. He was also doing IT. He was doing a million different things because, we were only 40 people. so, so basically he needed a lot of help, to scale at what we were doing. And hence where I came along. So I was basically kind of the first individual contributor sort of brought in. And basically I'm interviewing with multiple different people. I asked the CTO at the time, what would your expectation of me be in the first 90 days? And his answer was, I want you to hire at least 5 engineers. So I came in and I hired 7 in my first 90 days. And so I was super excited about, kind of the product and what they were doing and how aggressively they wanted to scale and all that kind of stuff. And so worked for about a year and a half as an individual contributor. We brought on a couple more team members as well for the talent acquisition team. We started to build an actual HR team. We brought in specific HR folks as well. And so about a year and a half after joining, my boss at the time left for another opportunity. And I quickly sort of realized, I was kind of at a pivotal moment in my career where I could either just kind of keep plugging away as an individual contributor, or I could throw my hat in the ring to sort of start managing the team. And so I started speaking with our at the time VP of HR about how I wanted to go for the role, and apply for the role and things like that. And so, because I had managed teams throughout my career, but not in a corporate setting. And I started realizing at the time that, as much as I don't particularly care about how old anybody might be when they're doing something, ageism is a real thing in the tech industry. We've all seen it. We've all, and seen companies, go through it and things like that. And so I realized, I didn't want to hit 40 years old and only be an individual contributor. Whether or not I stayed in management, I hadn't decided yet, but I at least wanted to get that experience so that I could not be just a 40-year-old individual contributor with no management experience. And so I was lucky enough to, and worked hard enough, I guess, would be more the way to put it, is where they decided to promote me to managing the team, which was a super exciting opportunity. One of the things, of course, with us still being a startup, and I think ideally, I haven't fully decided, someday when I move on to whatever my next thing might be, I would like to still remain hands-on, and that was something that I got the opportunity to do with Fubo, is still remain hands-on while also managing the team. I didn't want to fully get away from doing the
Yeah.
day-to-day recruiting. It's something that I still love doing. So fast forward, to now, I am the director of the team, global team. In fact, even with going through some layoffs and things like that, super unfortunate because I've lost some unbelievable team members that are all now working for great companies and still doing wonderful. I wish I still had them on my team, but I'm managing a global team, and managing the entire function for, 3 offices globally. We have New York. Here in New York is our headquarters. We have Paris, and we also have Bangalore, India.
Yeah.
And so, I had a team of 8 at one point, and but again, that when the teams start getting that big, I was not recruiting as aggressively as I have in the past. But of course, there's a lot more team management, process management, succession planning that comes along with it at this level and leadership roles. But again, still being able to remain hands-on, which I've loved. So.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to dig into that. Maybe not so much the hands-on stuff because I think that could be covered. But I think what
Yeah.
people really like to know is, so obviously the team's sort of changed in size, but you're in charge of a hell of a lot, and to be in charge of an entire sort of talent acquisition function,
Mm-hmm.
as we kind of alluded to already, there's so many aspects to that. Where do you even start? Because I'm thinking in terms of, I don't know, rec load for a recruiter, employer branding, processes, dealing with stakeholders within the business. There'll be a lot of people listening to this who are individual contributors in the recruitment world. And
Mm-hmm.
if they want to make that jump to the other side of the fence, up those ranks, what does it actually look like on sort of a week to week or from a strategy point of view? And are there any sort of key differences that maybe surprised you?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it's sort of been an ongoing thing, and it just sort of kind of naturally evolved into this. But I've always sort of, even as an individual contributor, and I guess I would say to the individual contributors out there that are kind of looking to maybe go the management path, get involved in the process and process strategy and potential process changes. It's been ongoing. Like I said, do we have something that works? Absolutely. Do I think that I'm the end all be all of processes? No. If there's something better out there that we could do, I want to know. So, as an individual contributor, bring those ideas to the table to your leaders, so that you can be recognized as saying, oh yeah, you helped change this process from this to this, and now look at how much more efficient it is, and that sort of thing. And so that was sort of what I did, and kind of one of the things I've always kind of been involved in is, no, this isn't working. We need to do X, Y, and Z to make this, better, and just kind of inserting myself into the process for efficiency reasons,
Yeah.
and speeding things up, because we all know, especially when it's a candidate's market, things are going to fly like this. People aren't going to be available for very long. We need to have a very streamlined process because, one of the things, and it all does come back to candidate experience as well, is that, like, I hate, when people are interviewing someone to death. There's really no need for an individual contributor to interview for 8 hours and meet 15 different people. That's insane, and so really getting involved in the process as an individual contributor to help make things more efficient can really give you some of that experience. Asking your boss, hey, how does this work when it comes to figuring out budgets and headcount planning, succession planning? If you have no idea how it works, sit down with ask your boss if you can sit down and kind of learn about it. Have them, or you're going to be, maybe you're not allowed in the meeting with the executives, right? But sit down with them afterwards and say, hey, can you explain to me how that went and like how it all works so that I get an understanding of like what you guys are talking about and what you're kind of planning for and how you figure it out, et cetera. And then, or maybe you would be just invited in the meeting to sit down and just observe while we're talking about, okay, well, if this person leaves, who do we have to potentially, what would we do? How would we fix it? If this SVP all of a sudden is not here any longer, who takes over? What do we do?
Yeah.
How do we plan for it, et cetera? And so sit down with your boss and try and figure out how those things work. Again, it's sort of naturally just sort of morphed into that for me in terms of, getting myself involved in these, trying to streamline processes is a constant battle and being as efficient as possible. And then, having to, listen, I had to teach myself and learn how to be a numbers guy. And when it comes to analytics and reporting and things like that, that was never my strong suit, especially, growing up in the hospitality industry and things like that. I mean, yeah, of course, numbers calculating like, what they owe me and that sort of thing. Sure. But like spreadsheets, that was not my world,
Yeah. We're the same like that. I was recruiter. You're just a people person, aren't you? It's a different how the way the brain works. And now I'm like, I'm looking at spreadsheets, data. I mean, I think that's as well, and maybe something that you found is that we hear a lot about, data-driven talent acquisition, follow the data, use the data.
Yep.
What on earth does that even mean? And I saw it, I think maybe probably just after COVID, when everything was really resurging back, was that there was. I feel like in talent acquisition sometimes there's these buzzwords that come in, and then everyone tries to jump on it, and then people using data for data's sake, and it kind of sort of goes up in flames. But obviously, there is ways to use data, brilliantly as well.
Absolutely, and people definitely hop onto the buzzword trains all the time and things like that. And, I don't know, maybe this will hurt me someday when I'm searching for another position or whatever. But my data analytics, like what I want out of my team, what I need to know for talent acquisition and things like that, it's really pretty basic. I'll be honest. It's the same thing that every talent acquisition team is doing. And I don't really feel that we need all that much more than this information. And the information is going to be, cost per hire, calculating the cost per hire, I think is important to look at and kind of see. Just because, you can figure out, okay, it is worth spending this money on this tool is totally worth it because now my cost per hire is going to be lowered by $1,000 or whatever, right? And so doing cost analysis around that kind of thing. But then also just looking at different metrics. How many, what's our offer acceptance rate? What's our time to hire? And how many calls are my team doing to get to the end result? And whether or not, some people have differing views on this, my personal stance, to be completely honest, is I don't really care how many calls that you make to get to where it's going. If you talk to 5 people or if you talk to 50 people, as long as we're getting a hire out of it, I don't particularly care. Now, granted, if you're not making any hires and you're only talking to 5 people in a week, then I'm going to approach my team members and say, this isn't enough. You're not producing enough to, you're obviously not having enough calls. Because listen, at the end of the day, as much as I hate the whole sort of dialing for dollars kind of thing, right? And the mindset of, well, obviously the more people you speak to, then the more chances that interviews are going to get across to the finish line, et cetera, et cetera. And you should be talking to 8 people a day and blah blah blah, whatever. Like these hard numbers like that, I hate. But there is absolutely some truth to it as well. It is somewhat a volume game where the more, that's how probability works and statistics works. The more people you talk to, the more chances you're going to have of getting it across the finish line. So yes, there's absolutely truth to that. But again, I don't particularly care, like I said, of how many people you're speaking to, as long as the end result is filling the roles. Get from point A to point B. I don't really care how you get from point A to point B. But so when it comes down, again, back to what I was saying, it really, the analytics that I'm looking at and the analytics that I need are pretty basic and pretty standard that every talent acquisition team is doing. I don't know that it really needs to get more granular than that. I don't even really know what else are people going to want besides the information that I'm already providing in terms of, offer acceptance rate, time to hire, looking at the volume of how many interviews are happening to get to the end result, looking at the cost per hire or that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when it comes to you talking about calls and things like that, as you sort of moved to like this management position, maybe when it was like a higher recruiting load, did you have trouble letting go? Because you are a great recruiter, your numbers speak for themselves, your closing rates, things like that.
I did.
And you can get in there and just get it done. You've got the experience and the track record. So, yeah. But now you're getting other people to do it for you. How was that?
That was a struggle for me. Absolutely, it was a struggle for me. Especially, I have a certain way that I like things done. And I have a certain way that I need things done in order for my reporting to be correct. And so it was a bit of a struggle as well to sort of step off and trust my team to do what needs to be done. That was a learning curve for me, is putting trust in people when I know I can just go in and do it myself and get it done right, So that was a learning curve for me. And, I think it's the sign of any good manager is to put that trust in your team. Obviously, you can get burned and you have to sometimes go in and fix it, right? But that's another good leader where you realize, oh, this isn't working. I've got to go and, I got to right this ship and that sort of thing. But yeah, it was definitely a struggle for me, for sure. Yeah. To sort of step back a little bit and let the team do what they needed to do, let the team run their process sort of their way in a way and really just deal more on the higher level of things. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Do you think can it sometimes you almost think that you're not doing enough or you're not working hard enough? Because when you're at the higher level, it's more about strategy and the quality of your decisions rather than making 50 calls. The trouble is that you can measure 50 calls. You can measure how many emails you send out. It's harder to measure the quality of the decision.
How do you measure succession planning and strategy with hiring managers? Yeah, absolutely. That certainly has been a struggle for me at times too, where, I'm just well, and I guess it's also sometimes just second guessing myself of oh my God, am I doing enough? Am I working hard enough? Am I doing it right? And that sort of thing. I mean, I think every manager has those battles with themselves and things like that. And then, Luckily, I've been really lucky to have incredible team members that where they make me look real good. And I've been able to set them on their path. This is our process. This is how we need to get things done. And via con Dios, and off they run. And they've been very successful. And it's been great. And so I've been lucky in that respect for sure as well. But yeah, I have certainly struggled with that. I have, gotten over it some just from some of the feedback from some of my team. When my team has given me feedback on my management style and things of that nature, it's really made me realize, oh, okay, you're doing it right. And you don't have to beat yourself up over the fact that you've only filled, like 10 positions in the last 8 months or something like that. It's not your job to fill 50 positions a year anymore. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's your job to do other things, and it's your team's job to be filling 50 positions a year,
Yeah. I think that is a real big thing in, well, probably any profession, but from our sphere of recruitment. And I've got the same as well, as I'm growing the team here at Ventilect. Like, yeah, you do feel like, because your sense of self-worth for so many years has been how many hires you've done.
Right.
And that's kind of what it's been built around, and your professional success has always been around placements, whether you're agency or internal.
And
then
the
when
number
that changes,
yep. But luckily, I did have to sit back and realize, okay, maybe I only placed X amount of roles, but it was the this executive level role and that VP level role and this, other high level position. And it's like these key figures at the top that are getting placed. And it's like, oh, all right, wait. Yeah, it doesn't have to be high volume when you're bringing the leadership team in, and that sort of thing. So,
yeah. And also as well, like,
go ahead.
If you facilitate a team that's making, hundreds of hires, you are actually making more of an impact than just doing it on your own. But
Sure.
Yeah, it's hard on the day-to-day to see that. One thing I did want to ask, what does sort of a typical week look like for a director of talent? How does it actually look in practice?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a lot of meetings, honestly. Yeah. It is a lot of meetings with some, recruiting calls and interviews and things peppered in there as well. So, I have individual meetings every week with all my team members of different levels. We have our group team meetings as well. And that's one-on-ones and skip levels and things of that nature, just to, how's everybody doing? How are you? Do you need anything from me? Are you enjoying the process? Are you struggling anywhere? Blah, 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 all that fun stuff that comes along with the one-on-ones, right? And then it's also just a lot of meeting with all the executives as well. Regular meetings with different executives from different groups for where are we in the process, updating them on what's going on. Have priorities changed? Because, I guess you can't really call Fubo a startup anymore. We've been around for quite some time, and we've been publicly traded for 2.5 years at this point. So we're not really a startup at this point. But that being said, we do still very much operate like a startup, really, super fast paced, a lot of shifting priorities and things like that. And which is something that I've always appreciated about the startup environment and Fubo in general and working here. But because of that environment, things do change often. We'll go into a new year with a mapped out headcount plan for the year of what roles we're going to fill. But I'm meeting with the leadership on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis to say, is that still a priority? Do we actually? No, we're scrapping that entire team, in fact, because things have changed and we've pushed back, a release date for this thing. And so we're going to focus on building that squad in 2024 instead, or whatever. These types of conversations happen. And so the headcount needs change for sure. So it's a lot of meeting with the teams to figure out, are we still on path to be doing the same thing that we had intended to set out to do? Is this still a priority? What are the bottlenecks? What's the problem? How come this role hasn't been filled? It's been, 4 months at this point, and we haven't gotten there. We haven't even had an offer go out. Like, what's going on? Why can't we get there? And that sort of thing. So there's a lot of meetings with the different HODs and groups to make sure process is running right. There are no roadblocks. Priorities haven't changed, etc. Like I said, succession planning is a big one throughout the year to figure out, what are we going to do if this person leaves? If that person leaves, because he or she's a senior software engineer on this team, if they were to leave, would you even need a senior resource to replace that? Or do you think maybe we could actually downgrade it and, get a fresh grad who's hungry to knock out some of those projects instead, whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of that going on as well with the leaders and things like that. And then, of course, I spend a lot of time, running reports and things like that, QCing the ATS system, making sure my team is doing everything properly that they need to, so that my reports that go to the executive team every month, are accurate and things like that. Because ATSs are great, but if you put garbage into them, you're going to get garbage out of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's just so much to it, and I think maybe some people at the sort of individual contributor level, don't see that, and it's good sometimes to hear what it's like.
Exactly, and I try and stress to my team all the time. I hate sometimes sounding like a broken record, but anytime that I see something that's not being done the way that I need it done, I have to hop on it regularly. And ATS maintenance, please, people, for all your bosses out there that are leaders of talent acquisition, ATS maintenance is so important, because when the leaders start going in and poking around and they see that there are 25 people in the tech screen stage, but actually only 5 of them are active because you didn't reject out the other 20 that are in there, it's giving a false sense of what the pipeline actually looks like, and like, not everybody has admin access to our ATS, nor should they. But a lot of our leaders and executive leaders do. And so they can go in and they can poke around and they can look around and see what the pipeline looks like. And if you're not maintaining the ATS on a daily basis and rejecting candidates that are no longer in the process, it's going to give a false sense of what the pipeline looks like, which is just no good for anybody. You want full transparency of what we have. 15 people in recruiter screens. We have another 10 that are interviewing with managers, and we have 3 that are interviewing on site. And, that's what the pipeline actually looks like, or whatever it might be, right? So the ATS maintenance is probably something that I harp on my team the most about, because it's just so important, like I said, for people to really get an accurate picture of what the pipeline looks like.
Absolutely. I wanted to talk to you about hiring recruiters as well when you're interviewing for people to join your talent acquisition team. What are you looking for, and are there any what are the common traits of successful recruiters, would you say?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, common traits I think are gonna be great communication and collaboration skills, and sort of proof in the numbers of like, hey, I've hired X amount, and being able to provide your own personal analytics behind what has made you successful in your previous positions and things like that. That's something that I'm definitely looking for. I want to know. I don't want buzzwords and fluff words in your resume and all that kind of stuff. To be completely honest, I don't give a shit. I want to know flat out, like, this is what I've done. These are the tools that we've used, and these have been the results. And these are the other projects that I've worked on outside of talent acquisition. Boom, 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 boom. Simple, you know, really simple bullet points on your resume to clearly explain to me what it is that you have accomplished, and things outside of talent acquisition maybe that you've worked on. And there are pretty easy ways to do it. I personally don't care what tools you've used. I want to know what you've used, but if you've used this ATS, you're going to be able to learn that ATS, but I want to know what you have used. I want to know. We're avid users here at Fubo of hired.com. Fantastic hiring platform for engineering and things like that. So shout out to my folks at Hired. But I want to know what other tools out there. There's tons of other platforms like that are out there. And so if you've worked with this one or that one or some other one, then lay that stuff out there. I'm using LinkedIn Recruiter, I'm using hired.com, I'm using XYZ to get to whatever, these are the tools that we have. We have Gem for analytics, or, whatever the case may be. I want to know everything that you're working with, because here's the thing. Maybe some of the things that we're using aren't as efficient as some of the things that you've used at your previous company. And we might want to actually start talking to these vendors, and, when budget times come up, and maybe switch to a different thing. And so that's some of the things I look for, is just very plainly, simply, clearly laying out what it is that you have done. And again, I'm not so concerned with folks if they've used different things than what we use. I just want to know what you have used and how it's been successful for you. We can teach you whatever platform we have that might be different.
Perfect. I think that was pretty comprehensive. And before we wrap up as well, I'm very aware of your precious time. I wanted to ask about you. How, in what impact do you want to make in your career, your talent acquisition career? And maybe tying into that, what does the future look like for yourself, or what do you want it to look like in your
Excellent
career?
question. And something I've noodled on a lot over the years and tried to sort of figure out, what's next? I don't know, right? Do I want, now that I've been in a leadership role, do I want to maybe just dial it back to an IC? Or do I want to keep climbing up the ladder and stay in leadership? That's an internal battle that I've had quite a bit. As of right now, it still leans on staying in leadership. I've worked my ass off to get here. I like what I'm doing, and I'd like to continue it. I think one of the biggest things for me personally is, and I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, but like, what I love about what I do is helping build an organization, and really having a big impact on the growth of an organization. And I've had a lot of success, over the past decade plus, of being able to grow a company, from one place to a much larger place. fuboTV, perfect example. When I worked for cheapoair.com, they were about 75 people in the New York office when I joined. They were, I don't know, between 300 and 400 when I left. It was massive amounts of growth and things like that. And so I think that will probably want to remain being my focus, is, maybe going to a company that is at a smaller stage than, say, even where Fubo is right now, and being able to grow it again. Do I need to go back to a 20-person startup? Not necessarily, right? But being able to grow a company through its hyper growth stages, and maybe bring another company through an IPO again would be a lot of fun, and that sort of thing. So I think that's sort of what again, it's something that excites me about what I do for a living, and what I love about what I do in my career. But I think it's just so satisfying to be able to say, yeah, I helped take that company from this level to this level. I mean, can you imagine being one of the first couple recruiters at a Facebook, or an Amazon, or a Twitter of the world, whatever? Say what you want about any of those companies, but must have been pretty cool in the early stages of a behemoth like that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, we're in recruitment. In the right places, you can make a massive impact. And I think it's fair to say that you have made a massive impact in your career, and I think will continue to do so. And it's been an absolute pleasure hearing everything. I mean, we've covered so much, so I just wanted to thank you for that. We'll wrap it up there.
Well, I got one more thing to just tack on to that as well, Alex.
Sure.
For the folks out there that end up listening to this, don't be afraid. I think there's a lot of things that I sort of focus on in my career that stick with my morals as well. And so don't be afraid to potentially say no to opportunities that come across your plate if you're not necessarily, aligned with what what the industry is, or who the company is, or who the leadership at the company is, or things like that. I was recently approached about a position that I very quickly said no, thank you. Not interested. For not only am I not looking for a new role right now, but just a moral opposition to what it is that they do as a company, and that sort of thing. And so, no matter what level you're at, don't take a job just to take a job, and don't take a job just to chase a higher paycheck, and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Never has a wiser word been spoken. Greg, thank you so much.
Alex, thank you. It's been a pleasure.